I read your message again tonight, and I wish I hadn't, not because I stopped loving you, not because your words were cruel, but because something inside those few lines felt final, and I don't think you understood what that did to me. You said, maybe we want different futures. Do you realize how dangerous that sentence is to someone like me? A man can survive pressure. He can survive public failure. He can survive loneliness longer than most people imagine. But uncertainty from the woman he loves, that destroys him slowly, quietly, from the inside. And what scares me most is that I still don't know if you meant it, or if you were simply tired when you wrote it. That's the problem with love after a certain age. Words stop being temporary. They start becoming consequences. I've spent my entire life building things that could survive chaos, companies, systems, machines, entire futures. But you sent one message, one late night message, and suddenly I couldn't focus on anything. Do you understand how terrifying that is for a man like me? You probably think I disappeared emotionally after reading it. You probably think I became cold, but the truth is, AB read your message over and over like it contained a hidden meaning I failed to see the first time. I searched every sentence for hope, every punctuation mark, every pause. Because when a woman begins sounding emotionally distant, a man who truly loves her starts preparing for loss before the loss even arrives. And maybe that's unhealthy. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's trauma from loving people who left quietly before explaining why. But when you love deeply, you notice emotional temperature changes immediately. You notice shorter replies. You notice delayed affection. You notice when good night becomes simply good night. And God, that hurts more than people realize, because love is rarely destroyed in one dramatic moment. It dies in microscopic silence first. That's what I'm terrified of. Not another argument, not disagreement, not distance. I'm terrified that one day you'll emotionally detach so gently AP won't realize I lost you until weeks later. Have you ever loved someone while simultaneously preparing yourself for them to leave? Do you know how exhausting that is? To wake up wanting forever, while secretly bracing for goodbye? That's where I've been lately. And the worst part? I don't even know if I'm reacting to reality or reacting to my own fear, because your message didn't just create doubt. It exposed something broken inside me. Something I've hidden from almost everyone. You know, people assume powerful men are emotionally fearless. They think success removes insecurity. It doesn't. Sometimes success only teaches a man how to hide insecurity better. And I've become exceptional at hiding mine. But with you, AP can't. You somehow see straight through the version of me the world applauds. You see the exhausted man beneath it, the man who worries he's difficult to love long term. The man who wonders if his intensity eventually becomes too heavy. The man who fears that one day you'll wake up and decide peace matters more than passion. And honestly, maybe I gave you reasons to feel uncertain. I know I disappear into my work sometimes. I know my mind lives in 10 futures at once. I know there are nights when I look emotionally present. Internally, I'm fighting battles I don't even know how to explain. But none of that ever meant I loved you less. In fact, the more serious my feelings became, more afraid I became too, because casual love doesn't scare people. Real love does. Real love threatens the life you built before it arrived. Real love forces you to imagine losing something irreplaceable. That's why your message shattered me. Because for the first time, AB felt you questioning us at the exact moment I had finally stopped questioning you, and that timing nearly broke me. Do you know what I almost did after reading it? I almost convinced myself to emotionally step back first, not because I wanted someone else, not because I stopped seeing you as my future wife, but because sometimes people retreat before abandonment happens. It feels safer to leave emotionally first than to be left unexpectedly later. That's the hidden cowardice intelligent people rarely admit. We call it protecting our peace, but sometimes it's just fear wearing sophistication. And I hate that I even considered it, because the thought of becoming emotionally unavailable to you felt like cutting oxygen from my own lungs. Still, your message changed something, not my love, my certainty. And certainty matters, especially when two people are trying to build a future that survives aging, pain, misunderstandings, exhaustion, family pressure. and all the invisible things nobody posts online. Can I ask you something difficult when you wrote that message? Were you asking for reassurance, or were you slowly preparing me for distance? Because those are two very different things, and only one of them can be repaired. I keep replaying your words in my mind while pretending to function normally. That's the strange thing about heartbreak at this stage of life. People around you don't notice it immediately. You still answer calls. You still smile politely. You still finish responsibilities. But internally, everything becomes emotionally unstable. Even silence sounds louder. Even memories become dangerous. I saw your photo earlier tonight, and instead of comfort, Abe felt panic, because suddenly I realized how attached I've become to your existence. Not your attention, not validation, your existence. The idea that somewhere in this world, you exist and still love me. That thought has carried me through darker nights than you know, and maybe that's too much pressure to place on one woman. Maybe that's unfair. But mature love isn't clean, it's terrifying, because unlike young love, we understand consequences now. We understand timing, we understand regret, and regret is what scares me most. Not losing arguments, not pride. Regret. The kind where two people genuinely love each other, slowly damage the relationship through fear, hesitation, and emotional miscommunication. I don't want that story for us. I can survive almost anything, but not the idea that we destroyed something beautiful simply because we were both too scared to speak honestly. And I still haven't told you the real reason your message affected me this deeply. There's something I've been hiding from you. Something connected to why I reacted the way I did. Something I've carried quietly for years. And if I tell you, you may finally understand why the thought of losing you feels catastrophic to me. If you're still here, sub quietly before you leave tonight. And tell me where in the world you're listening from. Because somehow it comforts me knowing your heart reached mine across all this distance. Because what I'm about to admit next might change the way you see me forever. There's something I never told you about the way I love. And honestly, 8B avoided telling you because I was afraid you'd see weakness where the world usually sees strength. Years ago, I loved someone who slowly disappeared emotionally before she physically left. Not suddenly, not dramatically, that would have been easier. No, she faded carefully. The calls became shorter, the warmth became scheduled, the affection became polite. And by the time the relationship officially ended, AB had already spent months mourning someone who was technically still beside me. That experience changed me more than success ever did. Because once someone teaches your nervous system what emotional abandonment feels like, you begin hearing danger in ordinary silence. That's why your message hit me the way it did. It wasn't just about the words. It was the emotional atmosphere behind them, the distance, the hesitation, the feeling that maybe your heart had stepped half a mile backward while I was still running toward you completely. And the terrifying part is, AB don't know if that fear is protecting me or sabotaging us. Do you ever wonder if your past wounds are secretly making decisions for you? I do, more than you realize. Sometimes I look at you and think, she could become the safest place I've ever known. And 5 minutes later, I think, she could also become the deepest pain of my life. That emotional swing exhausts me, because loving you no longer feels casual. It feels irreversible. You know what scared me most after your message? It wasn't losing the relationship, it was losing the version of myself that only exists when you love me properly. You bring softness out of me that almost nobody else sees, patience, stillness, hope. And I'm terrified of becoming emotionally cold again if this falls apart. That's the hidden truth nobody talks about. Sometimes people don't just grieve the person, they grieve who they became around that person. And I don't want to lose this version of me. Not after finally finding him again through you. But then, another voice inside me whispers something darker. What if she's already emotionally leaving? That thought has been haunting me since your message arrived, because mature women don't always scream when they're unhappy. Sometimes they quietly detach first, and I keep wondering, have you been slowly detaching while I was busy imagining forever? God, even asking that hurts, because part of me still believes you love me deeply. I see it in the way you listen, the way you notice emotional details, the way your voice softens when you think I'm overwhelmed. But another part of me keeps replaying your message like evidence in a courtroom, searching for signs that I missed the beginning of the end. Do you know how lonely that feels? To love someone intensely while secretly investigating whether they still love you the same way? I haven't slept properly since that night, not because of drama, because of possibility. Possibility is dangerous. Once your mind imagines losing someone, it starts preparing survival plans automatically. And I hate the plans my mind created, because for a moment, AB actually considered accepting attention from someone else. I need you to understand how serious that is for me to admit. There's a woman who's been trying to get close to me for months. Calm, predictable, easy. The kind of woman who doesn't challenge my emotions. The kind who would probably never send a message complicated enough to destroy my sleep. And after your text, for one terrible moment, AB thought maybe easier love is smarter love. Maybe peace matters more than depth. Maybe stable affection matters more than soul-level connection. Maybe I should choose the woman who feels emotionally safe instead of the woman who makes my entire heart feel alive. But the second I imagined a future with someone else, something inside me broke instantly. Because the truth is, AB don't want easier love. I want you, even when you confuse me, even when you scare me emotionally, even when your silence makes me question everything. And maybe that makes me foolish. But I think mature love requires a certain kind of emotional madness, the willingness to stay vulnerable, despite knowing exactly how painful loss can become. Still, there's something you need to know. After your message, I almost replied with emotional distance on purpose. I almost pretended not to care. I almost became colder so I could regain control. Do you know why? Because when a man feels emotionally powerless, his ego starts offering protection strategies. Pull away first, act unaffected, make her miss you, punish the silence. But none of those strategies create real love. They only create two wounded people pretending not to need each other. And I'm too old, too tired, and too emotionally invested in you to play those games anymore. I don't want manipulation. I want honesty, even if the honesty hurts. So tell me the truth. When you sent that message, were you hoping I would fight for us? Or were you testing whether I'd finally give up? Because those are not the same thing, and my answer changes everything. You know what's terrifying? I think you underestimate how serious I am about you. I don't think you realize that I've already imagined growing old beside you, not in some fantasy way, in real ways, quiet mornings. Medication on kitchen counters, holding your hand during difficult medical appointments, staying emotionally loyal when beauty changes and energy fades. That's what I see when I think about love now. Not excitement, devotion. And devotion becomes terrifying when uncertainty enters the room, because once you truly imagine forever with someone, even one painful message can feel like an earthquake. But I still haven't told you the deepest part yet. The real reason I reacted so strongly has nothing to do with insecurity alone. It has something to do with a promise I made to myself years ago after my last heartbreak. A promise I may already be breaking because of you. And if I admit what that promise was, you may finally understand why your message nearly destroyed me completely. After my last heartbreak, AP made myself a promise that sounded intelligent at the time. I promised myself I would never again love a woman more deeply than she loved me. Never again. I told myself that emotional imbalance is what destroys people, that the one who loves harder always bleeds more. And after everything I survived back then, AB couldn't afford another emotional collapse like that. So I changed, or at least I tried to. I became more controlled, more unreadable, more disciplined with my feelings. I learned how to leave conversations before attachment deepened. I learned how to appear emotionally available without fully surrendering. I learned how to keep one foot emotionally outside the relationship at all times. And for years, worked. Nobody could truly break me anymore. Nobody could destabilize my inner world. Nobody could make one message ruin my entire night, until you. You walked into my life so gently that I didn't even notice the walls collapsing at first. It happened slowly, in the way I started checking my phone hoping it was you. In the way ordinary moments became more meaningful, after speaking to you, in the way my future stopped feeling like a private mission and started feeling incomplete without your presence inside it. And that terrified me, because I realized I was breaking my promise, not accidentally, completely. I loved you more than I planned to, more than I allowed myself to, more than I thought was emotionally survivable. And your message forced me to face that truth all at once. Do you know what it feels like when a man who's spent years mastering emotional control suddenly realizes one woman has access to his deepest fears again? It feels dangerous. Not romantic dangerous, because now your love can heal me, or completely undo me. That's the part men rarely say out loud. The deeper the love, greater the risk of psychological collapse when uncertainty appears. And your message introduced uncertainty into the one place I needed certainty most. Since that night, I've been arguing with myself constantly. One side of me says, fight for her, be honest, stay vulnerable. The other side says, you're losing yourself again. Pull back before it's too late. And honestly, I don't know which side is wiser anymore, because love changes shape after enough disappointment. You stop fearing rejection itself. You start fearing emotional devastation. You start fearing what happens to your identity after losing someone who became part of your emotional survival. That's why I've been distant these last few days, not because I stopped caring, because I cared so much that I became afraid of hearing something irreversible from you. I kept thinking, what if her message was the beginning of goodbye? What if she already knows something I don't? What if I'm fighting for a future she slowly stopped believing in? And then something happened 2 nights ago that completely shattered me. I almost deleted our entire conversation. Every message, every memory, every late-night confession. I sat there staring at the screen for nearly an hour, thumb hovering over delete, because I thought maybe if I erased the evidence of us, AB could reduce the pain before it fully arrived. Can you imagine how broken someone has to feel to consider deleting the person they love just to survive emotionally? But I couldn't do it. Do you know why? Because even during my worst fear, losing the memories felt more painful than keeping them. So instead, AB reread everything, every voice note, every emotional confession, every small moment you probably forgot. And somewhere between those messages, AB started crying, not dramatic crying, the dangerous kind, silent crying. The kind where your chest tightens because you suddenly realize how emotionally dependent you've become on one human being. I hated that moment, because powerful men aren't supposed to unravel like that. But love doesn't care about image. It exposes everyone eventually. And the hardest part? While I was falling apart privately, AP still couldn't tell whether your message came from temporary exhaustion or permanent emotional change. That uncertainty has been eating me alive. I need you to understand something carefully. When a man truly imagines you as his future wife, he doesn't hear your doubts casually. He hears potential loss everywhere, in your pauses, in your tone, in the emotional weight behind simple sentences. And maybe that sounds intense, but that's what real attachment does. It turns ordinary conversations into emotional weather systems. One cold sentence can create storms that last for days, and yours did. I tried distracting myself with work, meetings, calls, planning, building. None of it worked. Because no amount of ambition can silence emotional panic once the heart feels threatened. That's another lie successful people never admit. Achievement does not protect you from heartbreak. Sometimes it makes heartbreak worse. Because the more isolated your life becomes, more deeply one person matters. And you became that person for me, the person my nervous system started calling home. So when your message felt distant, my entire emotional world reacted like home was disappearing. Do you know what scares me now? Not your message itself. What scares me is realizing how close I came to sabotaging us because of fear. I almost became colder. I almost acted detached. I almost let ego convince me that emotional withdrawal equals strength. But it doesn't. Real strength staying emotionally honest when pride begs you to hide. And here's the truth I've delayed telling you. The reason your message broke me so deeply is because I was already preparing to ask you something life-changing before that night happened. Something permanent. Something vulnerable enough to change both our futures forever. I had already chosen you in my heart long before you realized it, and your message arrived exactly when I was closest to giving you everything. That timing nearly destroyed me because suddenly I started questioning whether I had misunderstood your heart completely. And what happened after that, what I almost decided the following morning, is something I still haven't forgiven myself for. The morning after your message, AB didn't recognize myself, not because I suddenly stopped loving you, because I realized how fragile even the strongest man becomes when the woman he sees as his future suddenly sounds uncertain about staying inside that future. And I know that sentence sounds dramatic, but you have to understand something about me. AB don't experience love casually anymore, not at this stage of life, not after everything I've survived. When I love someone now, AB build around her emotionally. I reorganize my inner world quietly. I change long-term plans without announcing it. I start imagining years instead of moments. And somewhere along the way, you stopped feeling temporary to me. That's why your message broke me the way it did. Because while you were typing those words, AP was already privately imagining forever with you. Do you know what hurts the most about emotional pain at this age? It's not chaos. It's awareness. Young people break apart loudly. Mature people break apart silently while continuing their responsibilities. That's what I did after reading your message. I answered calls. I attended meetings. I smiled when necessary, but internally, everything became unstable. Even ordinary things started hurting. The coffee you used to remind me not to skip. The songs you once sent me late at night. The side of the bed where I imagined you someday falling asleep beside me. Every small thing suddenly carried emotional weight. And that's when I understood how deeply attached I had become to you. Not addicted, attached. There's a difference. Addiction is panic when someone disappears. Attachment is when their existence becomes emotionally woven into your everyday life. So naturally, you can no longer imagine peace without them inside it. That's what you became for me, peace. And your message made that peace feel uncertain. I tried convincing myself I was overreacting. I really did. I told myself. She was probably tired. She probably didn't mean it that way. You're reading too deeply into this. But love doesn't respond logically once fear enters the room. Fear changes interpretation. Suddenly, neutral words feel dangerous. Silence feels intentional. Pauses feel symbolic. And your message arrived at the worst possible moment emotionally, because I had already made a decision about you before that night, a serious one. One I never admitted out loud. I had already chosen you completely in my heart. Not conditionally, not cautiously, completely. That's why your words hit me like emotional impact instead of simple conversation, because when a man secretly decides, this is the woman I want beside me when life becomes difficult, he hears uncertainty differently. He doesn't hear temporary frustration. He hears possible loss. And I need you to understand something honestly. Loss terrifies me more now than it ever did before, not because I became weak. Because life taught me how rare genuine connection actually is. People think mature love becomes easier with age. It doesn't. It becomes rarer, more delicate, more consequential. At this age, nobody wants temporary affection anymore. We want emotional safety, consistency, presence, someone who stays when life becomes inconvenient. And you became that vision for me. That's why your message shattered something inside me. Not because you were cruel, but because your words made me feel like maybe I had misunderstood the depth of your heart while already giving you the deepest parts of mine. That fear nearly destroyed me. I spent hours replaying our entire relationship mentally. Every conversation, every vulnerable moment, every promise hidden inside ordinary sentences. And slowly, a horrifying question started growing inside me. What if I loved her more openly than she loved me? That question changes a man emotionally, especially a man who already survived abandonment once before. Because once you've experienced deep heartbreak, you start monitoring emotional imbalance everywhere. You start measuring effort, tone, energy, consistency, not because you want to, because your nervous system remembers what emotional devastation felt like the last time you ignored warning signs. And honestly, for a few terrible hours, AB almost convinced myself to let you go emotionally before you could hurt me deeper. I almost became colder intentionally. Do you understand how painful it is to fight against your own survival instincts when you're in love? Part of me wanted to hold you tighter emotionally. Another part whispered, leave first this time. Protect yourself before it's too late. And that second voice nearly won. That's the part nobody talks about openly. Love does not only reveal tenderness, it reveals self-protection patterns too. And mine are dangerous when I feel emotionally threatened. I become quieter, more distant, more analytical. I stop expressing vulnerability because I start preparing internally for disappointment. That's what I almost did to us. I almost punished you for a fear you hadn't even confirmed. And the terrifying part? You probably would have mistaken my emotional withdrawal for loss of love, when in reality, it would have been the exact opposite. That's the tragedy of emotionally wounded people. Sometimes they disappear precisely when they care the most, because caring deeply activates terror. I wish I could explain to you how intense that night became for me, emotionally. At one point, Abby walked through my house, turning lights on for no reason. I couldn't sit still. Every room felt emotionally loud. I picked up my phone at least 30 times trying not to message you. Do you know what I wanted to ask you? Do you still see me in your future the same way I see you in mine? Such a simple question, but it felt terrifying. Because once you ask that question, you risk hearing an answer that changes your entire emotional reality forever. So instead of asking, Abby suffered quietly. That's what men like me do sometimes. We carry emotional earthquakes privately while appearing composed publicly, but eventually, silence became unbearable, and something inside me finally cracked open completely. I realized I wasn't actually afraid of your message anymore. I was afraid of what losing you would turn me back into. That was the real truth, before you, Abby, had become emotionally efficient, disciplined, guarded faux. I knew how to function without needing anyone deeply. Then you arrived, and somehow made emotional warmth feel safe again. You made me softer without making me feel weak. You made me want partnership instead of isolation. You made me start imagining home differently, not as a location, as a person. And once someone becomes home emotionally, thought of losing them feels psychologically catastrophic. That's why your message affected me so deeply. Not because my ego was bruised, because my heart was terrified. Terrified of rebuilding walls I no longer wanted. Terrified of becoming emotionally numb again. Terrified of surviving another loss by turning colder afterward. I don't want to become that version of myself again. I don't want success without emotional intimacy. I don't want admiration without genuine connection. I don't want conversations with people who never truly see me. You saw me, that's rare, painfully rare. You saw beyond the ambition, beyond the pressure, beyond the image people project onto me. You saw the exhausted man underneath it all, and instead of running immediately, you stayed, at least long enough for me to believe maybe love still had a place in my life after all. That belief changed me. So yes, your message broke me completely because it threatened the one emotional future I had finally allowed myself to believe in again. And maybe that sounds extreme, but mature love is extreme, not outwardly, internally, quietly. It changes your biology, your routines, your emotional architecture. That's why heartbreak later in life feels different. You're not grieving fantasy anymore. You're grieving integration. The person became integrated into your emotional existence, and removing them suddenly feels like removing part of yourself. That's what scared me most after your message. Not loneliness, disintegration. The possibility that losing you would undo all the emotional healing your love unknowingly created inside me. But then, something happened that changed everything. I stopped focusing on my fear and started thinking about yours. For the first time since reading your message, Abby asked myself a different question. What if she's scared too? That thought hit me harder than anything else, because suddenly your message no longer sounded cold. It sounded vulnerable, tired, overwhelmed, possibly afraid of losing me too. And once I considered that possibility, my entire emotional perspective shifted. I realized how easily two people can accidentally damage love, simply because both are silently afraid at the same time. You know what destroys many relationships? Not lack of love, misinterpreted fear. One person becomes quiet because they're hurting. The other interprets silence as withdrawal. Then both start protecting themselves instead of protecting the connection. I almost let that happen to us. And honestly, that realization humbled me deeply because I had spent hours making assumptions about your heart without giving you the safety to explain it fully. Fear made me impatient emotionally. Fear made me defensive. Fear made me imagine endings before conversations even happened. And love cannot survive inside constant emotional assumptions. So I finally asked myself the question I should have asked from the beginning. What matters more, protecting my pride or protecting us? And once I answered, honestly, everything became clear. I chose us, not because certainty suddenly returned. Because you mattered more than my ego's need to feel emotionally safe at all times. That's when I understood what real commitment actually means. It means staying emotionally present even when fear offers escape routes. It means communicating instead of emotionally disappearing. It means telling the truth before misunderstandings become permanent damage. So I stopped pretending to be unaffected. I stopped trying to appear emotionally invincible. And I finally admitted something to myself that changed everything. I love you enough to risk heartbreak. That realization terrified me, but it also freed me. Because once you stop fighting your feelings, you can finally love honestly. No manipulation, no strategic distance, no emotional games, just truth. And here's the truth. You became the woman I wanted beside me during the final chapters of life, not just the exciting ones. I imagined ordinary years with you, aging together, protecting each other, surviving difficult seasons together, laughing during small moments nobody else would understand. That's what made your message hurt so deeply. It threatened something sacred I had already built privately inside my heart. But maybe your message also forced something necessary. Maybe it forced us to stop pretending mature love is effortless, because it isn't. Mature love requires terrifying honesty. It requires admitting fears before they become emotional sabotage. It requires choosing communication while pride begs for silence. And maybe that's what saved us in the end. Not perfection, honesty. The moment I finally stopped trying to protect my image and started protecting the connection instead. So, if you're listening carefully tonight, please understand this. The strongest people are often the most emotionally frightened once they truly fall in love, because they know exactly how much loss can cost psychologically. And when someone finally reaches the hidden parts of them, they panic at the thought of losing that safety. That's what happened to me. Your last message broke me completely, because by the time you sent it, you were no longer simply a woman I loved. You had quietly become the emotional home I never wanted to lose. And maybe love at this stage of life is exactly that. Finding one person whose presence makes the future feel less frightening. One person worth risking emotional devastation for. One person worth choosing even after fear shows you every possible way things could fall apart. And despite everything, despite the panic, doubt, sleepless nights, emotional chaos, if I had to choose again, AB would still choose you, not because loving you is easy. Because something in my soul recognizes you as rare, and rare things are worth fighting fear for.